Next up, let's talk about forms in Bootstrap. So there's a lot of different components we could cover for forms. I'm just going to show you the basics, some of the most important ones. Forms are annoying, or they can be annoying to style, to make look nice, and to lay them out, but Bootstrap makes it very easy. So the first core component, the first class name you need to know, is called form control. And this is what we put on the input itself. So if we have a text input, an email input, a password input, a number input, whatever it is, we use class equals form control. And that's going to give us a nicer looking form input. So we get these custom styles that are coming from Bootstrap. You can change them and override them, but the defaults look pretty good. So why don't we play around with that first? And while I'm here on the docs, you'll see another class called form group that is used to group together a label and an input. It doesn't do a whole lot. If you scroll down, I believe they explain it somewhere on here. It's a flexible class that encourages the grouping of labels, controls, help text, form validation, messaging. It's just going to apply some margin, so it doesn't really do a whole lot, but it just groups things together. So let's make a simple form here. I've got a new document. It's just forms, an H1, nothing else. It's got Bootstrap included. I'm going to go ahead and add in a form. So we can do an actual form if we want. I'm just going to have it go nowhere. And then in here, I'll start by adding in a form group div. And then in there, let's add a label. What will this be for? Let's say we're doing just an email. So for email, and then we'll add our input where type is email. We give it class of form control. That's the Bootstrap class. And then I'm going to give it an ID of email and a placeholder of email as well. All right, so there we are. This is our email. I don't know, that placeholder looks kind of weird. We've got our first form control. Now notice it goes all the way across. It takes up the entire width of whatever the containing element is. That might seem odd, but if you think back to the grid system from one video ago, this means that we can use these form inputs, these form controls, and lay them out using the grid so that we can create forms that look nicer, where we could have, inputs sharing a row or 3 inputs across. So we'll play with that in a moment. Let's just make one more form group here. Let's do password. So form group, this will be for, let me just replace all password just like that. Let's see what that looks like. Here's our password input. Okay, so just form control once again. So we can actually use form control, the same class, to make a select, a multi-select, a text area. Let's do a select, maybe for state. We'll have people pick a state. So we just need to use form control on the select, and then a label and a form group. Those aren't mandatory, but they're always a good idea. So let's do that here. Form group once again, and then we'll have a label. Let's go with state, and for will be state. Then we have our select. Name will just be state for now. We're not using that. ID is state. Oh, I butchered that. Jeez. Okay. And then we have a couple of options. And I'm just going to populate this with, let's see, Alabama, Alaska, Arizona. Okay, we'll just go with Alabama and Alaska to start. So we're not going to do all 50 options. All right, so right now I do not have, lovely. I don't have form control set on my input on the select, but if I give it class equals form-control, refresh, there we go. Looks significantly better. All right. So that's how we can use form control for selects. Same thing for creating a multi-select text area. I think you can figure that part out. We can make inputs larger and smaller using form control large, or LG, and SM for small. We can do that for selects as well. Now checkboxes and radio buttons are a bit different. So without going into too much detail, changing the appearance of a checkbox in your browser is not as easy as you might think. You can't do things like change the border size or the color or there's just different things that are very challenging to do compared to a regular input like a text input or a password input. So we have one option, which is to use basically the browser's checkbox. You use a class called form check. This just sets the spacing slightly differently. I'm just going to copy this so we don't waste too much time. I'm just going to show this to you. Let's put this down here. Our label will say, sign me up. Okay, So it's just a class of form check for the div, the parent. And then we have our checkbox, and then we have our label. And they each have a form check label and form check input class. And this is what that looks like. Now there's another option. If we go down, just find over here for custom form inputs. Bootstrap comes with its own customized versions that are brand new elements that are completely different than the browser defaults. So this may not look radically different, this checkbox, but it is. If you see that animation, there's a little bit of that glow. It animates in and out. The icon is different, the rounded corners. This is a customized checkbox, and there's a lot of work that goes into making that, because what actually happens is that there's a hidden checkbox, a regular browser default checkbox that you can't see, and then there's this customized thing on top, and they're linked together. So without going into too much detail, I don't want to bog us down here, we'll just copy this, and you'll see that we use a class called custom control, custom checkbox, 2 classes. Then we have our checkbox, then we have our label. So I'm just going to copy that, paste it in so we can compare. Here we go. Here's the default checkbox, and here is the custom checkbox. So a nicer experience, in my opinion. It's just more work. Fortunately, with Bootstrap, we can just reference the docs and copy what we need and tweak it. So let's use that one. We don't need the default. Let's go with sign me up. And then we'll just do ID of maybe register or terms of service or something like that. I don't know. TOS. And then label will be for TOS. Okay. So lots of classes involved, right? Custom control input, custom control label, custom checkbox, custom control, but it's worth it. Now the same thing goes for radio buttons. So we can get custom radio buttons that have that same little glow effect. They look nicer. I'm not going to go into detail here. We also can do switches. Now those are nice. They're built on top of a checkbox as well. So input type equals checkbox, but you're not going to see the checkbox. You're going to see the custom switch that Bootstrap adds on top for you. So that's nice. There's also customized selects. So they have a slightly different interface. What else is there? We've got a customized range input. So there are lots of options. I have a course on Bootstrap, and we spend like an hour plus just talking about forms and inputs and custom inputs. But I don't want to bore you to death. You can always find what you need on these docs. Now, the last thing I do want to show you is creating form layouts. How do we break this form up so it's not just everything on its own line, a super long form? There's probably a better way of doing this. So there is. We can use the grid system. Let's say I want email and password to go side by side. Those look way too long. So let's start there. It's as simple as just putting them in a row and using column classes. So for example, I can create a row here. I'll just group those two, email and password, and then each of those form groups, I can give them a column. I could just do COL, and they'll just share that space. And there we go. Now there is a different class that we can use. It's called form row. It's super similar to row, just regular row. It just changes the default spacing, that gutter size, so that our forms are a little more compact. Here's a regular row, here's form row. So let's do that instead. Okay, so they go closer together. So let's expand upon our form. I'm just going to add another one, another input here for address. So address, just like that. Our placeholder will be something like, 923 Chicken Ranch Street. And ID will be address. And I want this one to go all the way across. Let's say street address to be more specific. And type will be text. So I'm not even going to bother putting it in a row. I don't need to, although that looks a little odd. What should I do? Oh, I gave it the column class. It's not in a row, so I don't need column. Now, what I probably want to do is, this is getting a little cramped. I may want these to go on their own row, take up a full line of space on small sizes. Well, we know exactly how to do that. Instead of just column, I could just say, where would I want that to happen? Small, maybe medium. We'll play around with it, but let's say medium 6. Anything below that, it will take up the entire line. Once we hit medium, it should take up 6 out of 12. So there we go. Takes up the entire row. Then we'll hit medium right there, and they share the space. Looks pretty good. Okay, so we've got state here. That's way too large for that. I'm also going to add in city. So let's add in a city input, which will just be a text input. So just put city right there. Placeholder, I don't know if we need a placeholder, honestly, for now. It takes up its own line, but what I want to happen is for it to share space with state, and I'm also going to add in zip code, and I'm going to do that after state. So this will be zip. For zip, this will be zip code, class form controls, ID is zip. All right, so now I want these guys to be in a row together, and they're going to share the space. So I'm going to create a form row around them. Form row. End it right there. Okay, and now I need to distribute them. So I want city to take up the most space. I'm not sure exactly, maybe 7 units. Let's see what that looks like. Might be a bit large, maybe 6. And then state doesn't need a whole lot. Let's do column, let's see, 3 maybe. And zip can be 3 as well. I think that could work. Of course, that's going to be quite cramped on small sizes. So I'm going to have that happen probably at medium, just like we did for the others. Now we could play around with that too. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, we could probably have state and zip code actually share that space. So, slightly more interesting. We'll just go with column 6 and column 6 for state and zip code. So now they share that space 50-50 on all sizes and up, except, nope, from medium and up, they're now 3 and 3. So here we go. Looks definitely better. It's responsive. It looks decent on mobile. It's not amazing, obviously. We're still missing a button. We should put that in there. But yeah, it's pretty good. Let's add in a button right at the very end. So we'll do should we do input type equals submit? Now let's just do a button. Button type equals submit. Class equals, let's do BTN primary or success maybe. And let's go with register. It's a little bit cramped here, and that's because I don't have a form group. So dot form group around that checkbox. I mean, there's other ways of getting some margin there, but that's the easiest way in a form, just to keep this spacing consistent. So there we go. We've got a relatively nice looking form using Bootstrap. It's responsive. We laid it out exactly how we wanted. We could change the size of these inputs. There's really a couple of core concepts, the form group class, and then the form control class, which we apply to most of the standard inputs. And then we can get fancier with custom inputs like custom checkboxes and radio buttons and toggle switches. But this is really the core stuff that we need to know for now. So that's a rough intro to forms in Bootstrap.